This is the Private Investigator Experience Podcast, and I'm Phil Little, your host. Thank you for joining me. If this is your first time with me, I own West Coast Detectives International, a 102-year-old global security firm. I work my cases through the lens of my military, law enforcement, intelligence service, and global security background. And then I add just a touch of my biblical worldview to come up with a solution. Today's post is part 2 of the 1,500 missing passports. I gave a background on this case, how I got involved in international work, which I've had a lot of questions about, and this particular case. And remember, these cases, many of them, some we worked over the years similar to this, had months sometimes, if maybe a few were weeks, but most were longer. So in a podcast, I can only get the highlights. So I'm trying to condense it into an ease of listening that gives you what went on and the facts and some of the things we did. And so I'm going to pick this case up. Last time I gave you the situation that this happened in Vienna, and there were 1,500 passports stolen from a country in Vienna at their embassy that I won't use their name for security reasons. And the contacts that got a hold of me were concerned that they weren't getting fast enough action through the normal channels, and they knew that I had a footprint out around the world where I had people on the ground and relationships that sometimes the government didn't have. So if you remember, if you didn't watch that first post, you could go back and watch it. It ended when I was with my contact on the ground in Vienna over lunch, and I'd asked her about what she had heard about the theft of the passports. She gave me some information, if you'll recall, about Marcelino, the clerk at the embassy that was considered to be the suspect, and according to information on the ground and roaming around the streets, the back streets, shall we say, of Vienna. So she gave me that information, and we broke off that lunch, and that's where it ended. Now I'm going to pick up from there. So on that day, after meeting with Alexa at 7 p.m. that night, Mario arrived and came to my suite with the files of what they knew about the missing passports. Now, Mario was a contact with the government in Vienna that I had met at a dinner with friends a few months before, and we'd exchanged cards, and he had told me if I ever needed anything to get a hold of him. And he went on to say that they'd finally gotten the embassy to file the stolen report, and they'd come up with the passport numbers, which they felt were correct. As I looked through the numbers, I found the number of the one that MI5 had seized at the Heathrow airport. And I said, it looks like we got the correct ones. Now, the big question is, where's the 1,499 others, and how many do the people behind the mule in Heathrow have? As we talked over dinner, we discussed some action we could take to see if we could rattle the treaties to see what might fall out. I told Mario that I would be going to the American Embassy to meet with the OSAC, that's the Overseas Security Advisory Council, contact at the American Embassy in Vienna, and along with the regional security officer. I arrived there the following morning at 9 a.m. and it didn't take me too long to be sitting in the office of the RSO with coffee in hand, and another person who introduced himself as Robert, a counselor officer. And my take was that he was CIA attached to the embassy, which I was later found out I was correct. After changing some get acquainted questions, I brought up the reason I was there, the 1,500 missing passports from that country embassy. Without the information from Alexa telling them, I told them what I knew at that point. I thought I'd keep what Alexa said kind of close to the vest at this point to see what they said. The RSO was careful with what he said, but his information about what had occurred was very little. We knew they weren't getting much from the embassy. We discussed the possibility of what had occurred. He volunteered that he could set up a meeting with contact from that country embassy if I wanted to see what I could find out. We agreed and said, set it up. And I left the embassy, American embassy, about 15 minutes later with a meeting at that country embassy. The wait was short when I got to that embassy, and I found myself across from a man who introduced himself as Roberto, a no-nonsense-looking man who was undoubtedly a security or an intelligence asset. He asked me how he could help me, and I told him that I was working on the 1,500 stolen passports with the concern that someone might be using them to try to get into the U.S. He responded with kind of an evasive response, probably a predetermined, well, we're working on it, and we'll let you know what we find out. When I asked him about the theft, being possibly an inside job, and I brought up an employee named Marcelino, he got a surprised look on his face, which kind of froze, and then his eyes was locked with mine, and he was looking me over pretty carefully. And then after what seemed like minutes, he responded, he's being detained in our custody in connection with the theft. I asked him, well, what have you found out? Not a lot, he said. He's denying any involvement. I asked about the list of passport numbers, and he said they were working on it to verify the list they had. I asked him if I could talk to Marcelino, since many countries had concerns about these stolen passports. He said, well, I'll have to get you approval, and told me to wait in his office. As I was waiting, I called Alexa and told her to get your father on the line. Her father, Dmitry, was former banker of Russia and lived in Vienna, and he knew everything going on, legal and illegal. So if there was connections to these passports somewhere, he'd know it. And I told Alexa, get a hold of your dad, find out everything he knows about Marcelino, any contacts, names, personal relationships he had, and text those to me on my secured text, and hopefully I'll get those before I interview Marcelino. 30 minutes passed, and Roberta came back to the room and said, keep it short, we will be recording the conversation. Marcelino was in a holding cell in the basement of the embassy. It was not a dungeon like third world countries. It was a room very well appointed and locked and security type room. I entered the room and introduced myself. I did some small talk about how he was doing. As I finished, my phone vibrated, and as I glanced at the line of text started running, I told him I would be right with him. As I read the scroll, my eyes focused on the name of one of the young boys, Hugo, he was attached to, a special one apparently. And as I was thinking about how to use it to get Marcelino's willingness to talk, I took a deep breath and started asking questions about his personal life, where he lived, family, friends, where he hung out, how he spent his time, did he have hobbies and all that stuff. As he was replying, I said, well, what about your friend Hugo? He stopped in mid-sentence and froze. I watched his lips quivering, and his Adam's apple was moving rapidly up and down, signs of high stress when you're interrogating someone. I let him stew for a few minutes and then said, perhaps there are things you'd like to keep private. So, maybe you could help yourself. I need the list of passport numbers and who your contact was for the theft and why they wanted them. Several minutes passed as he was processing his situation. It was apparent that the name Hugo had struck a deep chord, and when he responded, he said, Hugo had nothing to do with this matter, and I must be assured that he will be left out of it. I said, well, if that is true, then there will be no need for him to be involved. He paused, took a deep breath, and in a low voice, he said, the contact information and the passport numbers are in my desk. In the bottom right-hand drawer, there's a false bottom. You'll find them there. He said, all the information I have about the people who requested the passports and how I got to them is there. I knew that Roberto would be listening, and he would be on the way to the office. So I kept talking, trying to glean more from Marcelino. And about 10 minutes later, a knock came at the door, and I bid my farewell to him and left the room. As I left, Roberto handed me a list of the passport numbers and said, "This is definitely the correct list." And he also handed me some papers that had some notes on it about the suspects who had ordered these passports and Marcelino to steal them. Probably it's going to be a dead end, but you never know. Now I would get these details to Mario and to Dixon in the U.S. I had just reached the hotel when my encrypted phone gave me the signal that Dixon from the States was on the line. He didn't waste time this time. No pleasantries. He just shouted out, "Where are you?" I responded, I'm at my hotel in Vienna. He said with urgency, "Another passport showed up in Paris. You need to be there yesterday. I am not comfortable with the locals taking this seriously enough with what we know about the missing briefcases. I've arranged a plane for you to get to Paris. It is ready to go at the airport at the FBO, which will take you to Charles de Gaulle Airport, where the suspect is being held. You've been cleared to be part of the team. Let me know when you get there and give me an overview of what's going on. Are you headed to the airport yet?" I responded, "Of course, I'm there." Dixon responded, "You are so funny. Just get to move on. Time is money." On the plane, I called to my contact at the French National Police, who ran our operation at our Paris substation, for anything he could find out. And 15 minutes later, he called me back with the information that the suspect was in their custody but wasn't talking. He advised me that my contact there was Detective Delfort, and he was told to fill me in and work with me. I arrived at the French National Police office, and Delfort pointed me to the one-way mirror of the suspect and said, "He isn't talking and appears to be unconcerned, a little bored with the situation." The suspect was named Fahoud Al-Fulani, a businessman, and from Lisbon. He was importing fabric from India. I flipped through the cloth and it came out of his briefcase. So it was a high quality. I asked what they knew about the suspect, and Delfort responded. And at this point, we knew he moved to Lisbon from Saudi Arabia last year, applied for citizenship. The address is check out, on paper at least. Haven't had time to get a man there yet. The door opened, and another officer stepped in. He glanced at me and turned to Delfort. "You should see this, sir." He turned to the corner and put the DVD in a player. The screen showed up and monitors with indicating flight departures. The man in the gray suit, who looked a lot like Al-Fulani, walked up to the monitors and set down an oversized salesman's case and then studied the listings, consulting an itinerary in his hand. A maintenance cart rolled into view. Past the monitors, stopped at a trash can right near the suspect, Al-Fulani. He said, "Watch the briefcase." The maintenance man knelt down, pulled a plastic trash bag from the stack. The maintenance man knelt down, pulled a plastic trash bag from the stack on the lower level of the cart, and shook it open. Without looking, he reached over for the attaché case, setting by Al-Fulani, pushed it into the cart under the stack of bags. He pulled out an identical case and set it next to the man in the gray suit and moved on. I looked across the room. The case was open on the side table, next to the fabric samples. Delfort had rummaged through them, digging through the file folders, a pair of reading glasses, and some keys. The question is, which is a real case and which is the decoy? I said, maybe they're both real. It could be that it was an exchange. One has merchandise or information, one has payment. Delfort told the agent to take the case downstairs to forensics and see what they could find out. Delfort handed the case to the other officer. I took the wait time and used our locker room to take a shower and change clothes. After a quick coffee and croissant, I went back to Delfort's office. He looked up from a stack of papers as I walked in and said, "Your luck holds, mon Amir," waving me to a chair. The case had a false bottom. $250,000 US. We're having further conversations with Mr. Alfravani. He does not look so bored now, he said. He smiled at me with a quick spasm of his lips that didn't touch the rest of his face. The worker is Abdul Adora, hired in 1999, who made the shift of the briefcases. His shift ends at noon. I quickly said, I would like to be with the surveillance team. Delphic said, it is not customary. Okay, I'd like to be with the surveillance team. It will require approval, Delphic said. I'd like to be with the surveillance team. I see that you're insistent. I shall inquire. As I waited for Delphic to get the approval, I went to the restroom and called Jean Albert, my inside man at the French National Police, and said, I need 2 agents, both on motorcycles. We had off-duty police and military operators who worked for us that Jean Albert handled. I gave him the location, and he would tap into the radios the surveillance team would be using. He gave me the frequency on my unit that the 2 motorcycles would be on. It wasn't that I didn't trust the units with the airport police, but this was a high-stakes tale, and they were aware that losing Abdul Ador was not an option. I was in the back of the unmarked Peugeot, and it turned out the subject left the airport on foot, and we were now outside a grocery store on Bourgois. Agents on foot had followed him from the airport to the RER terminal, where he took the B line into the city. We followed him into the city, and I had tied the radios into the West Coast Detectives Paris system, and my techs kept the office and my read agent, Newton, who was on a BMW F650 a block away and out of the line of sight of our loop of operation. As we sat in front of the grocery shop, my text went off, and Newton sent me a text. Hey, your subject just went out the back door. Delford's team had been lax by not putting someone on the back door. I got out of my car and told him I would go to get a coffee, as it was probably going to be a while. When I got inside the coffee shop, I put in the earpiece and asked Newton, what do you have? I'm on him. He just walked past me while I was checking the pressure on my tires. You need backup, I asked. Nope. John and is playing tag with me. I can give you play-by-play status if you want. I'll be on the line. Just give me action reports. As I watched the agents outside, finally one of them went into the grocery store and came out and came across to the coffee shop and said, he got away. He went out the back. I said, you didn't cover the back? He responded, there was no reason to. That the subject would suspect he was being followed. Why would he use the back door? Well, maybe because he's one of the bad guys, I said. I told him to take off. I would find my way back and settled in the way to run the subject to the ground, which I didn't doubt that he would do. I'd finished my sandwich and was in for the call when my ear filled with Newton's voice saying, he took us on a wild run, in and out of stores, backtracking, but we have him settled at a detached house on Rue de Mons, number 17. I called Delford and gave him the information and that I was en route to that location and we needed an entry team. I arrived at the location after a car had picked me up from our Paris station. The house was set back from the street, surrounded by a stone wall and a garden. It was not the house of an airport maintenance worker. It was an upper middle class in a stable neighborhood, the kind of neighborhood that was deserted during the workday, a place where no one would notice a workman walking in at 2 p.m. or leaving at midnight. The agents on the scene had done a recon on the house and found cameras on the front and back, so it was waiting time. At 20:57 that evening, a BMW turned down the street, opened the gate remotely, and entered the garage. The raid unit, the reaction, assistance, intervention, and dissuasion of the French National Police had arrived, and I was in the van with them. Herbert, the lead agent, went over the floor plans, pointing out the view of the cameras where the front and rear entrance teams would be provisioned prior to the power cut. At 3:30 a.m., the back door of the van opened and the team slipped out. Heat imaging indicated there were 2 people inside and in separate rooms, both apparently asleep. They had opted for a silent entry with a signal for a hard entry if the alarm was tripped. 6 agents lined up at the stone wall with the lead agent by the driveway. The other agent took positions on the back corner of the house. The tech team followed and stopped at the utility connection. I was in the van with Herbert. When all the teams checked in, Herbert gave the signal. The tech team cut the phone and the power lines. The front team was at the door in 3 seconds. Through the lock in another 10 seconds. The tech team was right behind them. The line panel was just inside the door. A flip of a screwdriver popped off the front panel, and a jumper was inserted between the red and green lines, well before the 45 seconds that the alarm would go off. So far, so good. If the other safe houses were possibly wired into their security, they would see just a normal disarm signal. The techs gave a nod in the light of the flashlight, and the teams flipped down their night vision goggles and crept down the hall, guns drawn. Now that the moon had set, the darkness inside the house was complete. The terrorists would not be able to see them at all. The team went down the hall, and the lead agent stopped at the first door and motioned to the 3 agents to take the door as arranged. He took the 2 remaining agents and crept to the next door. He moved to where everyone could see him and did a silent countdown. When he held up his closed fist, 2 men silently entered each room, one with a Glock 19, the other with a tranquilizer gun. A third remained by the door. Within seconds, they had both suspects in custody, and we watched from the cameras as the teams were carrying that out and had left the van to go in even before the team gave us the all-clear signal. When inside, we closed all the blinds and turned on the lights. The terrorists looked sullen, silly in their pajamas. Herman fired some questions at them, but they weren't talking. The radio and the forensic team, who was a few blocks away, waiting. They arrived to begin dissecting the house. Everything was neat, too neat. It appeared to have been furnished from a mail order catalog. After going through the house, a wine cellar was discovered. Wine was prohibited in Islam, but they were in France, so do as the French do. It was an extraordinary fine collection. When I saw the 1832 Chassagne Montrachet that appeared to be in mint condition, I confirmed it. That is the best white wine in the world. You know, just a side note, James Bond only drank Montrachet wine. That wine, all you needed to do was smell the bouquet. It was exquisite. But something wasn't right about the whole scene. I glanced to the stairs, and Jack, the head of the hazmat team, was coming down. He had a meter in his hand. "Jackpot," he said, and smiled at the wealth of the wine. "I don't care what you say. I love France." I said to him, "Not the wine, the meter in your hand." Charles from the team said that it is hot, all right, but these bottles have been here a long time. I stepped closer to the racks and said, "Maybe, maybe not." They looked at the radiation meter, and it was more than should have been in a normal house. My focus was on the wall racks, and I had memories of cases where the racks on the wall held a world of mystery behind them. All you had to do was to find the right catch. I looked at the racks. Everything seemed in order. They were flush at the top and appeared to be near the floor. Well, almost. I got on my knees and pressed on my finger along the edge just under the sleeve, and a couple of feet from the end I found a rod that was connected to the end. I pulled it. It moved a little but stopped. I stepped back, looked at the shelves. Where was the opening? And a thought entered my mind. I went to the left side and slowly ran my finger under the end, and bingo, a button. I pushed it and then pulled, and the shelf swung out. As it opened, there was a small room with files and crates behind it. As I walked into the room, the first thing I saw was 8 large silver briefcases. What is this? I checked one and it was locked. This was not the briefcase you wanted to pry open, if it is housing what I think it is. I opened one of the file drawers and inside found 6 boxes, each containing 50 of the stolen passports. The other drawers also had boxes with passports. Counting will have to be left till later, but hopefully we will find 1,498 to account for the 1,500. But later, I learned we were missing 12 of the 1,500 passports. Herman stepped in and said, "Merry Christmas, Phil," and started to call Delford when I stopped him. I asked him, "What do you make of the briefcases?" Herman said, "What of them?" "Well, Jack's little box says they are hot, very hot." Herman grunted. He scanned the room and stepped to Charles. "Don't let anyone else down here. And the reading on your meter is privileged." Several hours later, back at my hotel, ready for some sleep after the events of the last 24 hours. I wondered, was my part in this over? We found the passports, but we're missing ones and still may be in play some way with these briefcases. Well, the future will unfold as it unfolds. I need some sleep right now to think clearly before I talk to Dixon. Well, we accomplished the first part of our mission. We found the passports, or at least most of them. We had now another mystery unfolding, and we'll see later on if I had any part in that with the events of these briefcases and those ones that were missing. You can help me a lot if you like, share, subscribe, and you know the drill. Hit that notification bell so you will know when future posts come out. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, or just things that you would like to hear about, leave your comments on any of the platforms, or you can email me, pi777@gmail.com. Now, if you might have a situation in your life or family or business that you would like to find out if a private investigator could help, send me that information on that, and I'll get back to you and let you know if it would be a case that a private investigator could help. Until next time, be safe. May God bless you, your family, and may God bless America.